All right, everybody, we're going crazy with the uploads today, as is wont to happen when your team's season basically comes to an end in a humiliating, embarrassing fashion. And if I'm not making a lot of Seahawks videos right now, then what am I doing on YouTube making Seahawks videos in the first place, right? Like, now is the time for a content flood. So, Pete Carroll had another press conference today, and I want to go over some of the things he said, mostly related to injury news. I want to go over some of the things that he had to say about that. But we are definitely going to pepper in some of the signs of the house collapsing in Seattle as well before we're done here, because irrelevant of what he said specifically, if you watch the press conference, he doesn't look a whole hell of a lot better than he did yesterday when he gave one of the weirdest press conferences of his career in Seattle. So clearly, things are no better today than they were yesterday. You're still 3-7. You're still right near the bottom of the NFC. You're still having a disastrous season where nothing's really going right. And it ultimately all comes back to Pete Carroll because he's been here for over 10 years and he controls every meaningful facet of this team. So we will get into that a little bit. I want to dive into some of the signs of dysfunction with this team that I also can pick up from these post-game pressers. But before we get there, let's talk about these injuries because we do have some very bad news as well as some less bad news, but it's all pretty much bad news. I mean, it's not as bad as having your season be over at 3-7 and last place in your division when you went all in the offseason to try to win a Super Bowl, but it's still bad. And we're going to start with the big one, but none of this is fun, and I kind of just want this season to be over. So, Tre Brown, the big one. He got hurt yesterday on a play where he gave up a third down completion to A.J. Green, and it looked bad. And we kind of knew it was bad, but now we know for a fact it's bad. It looks like he's going to have season-ending surgery for hurting his patellar yesterday. According to Carroll, season-ending surgery is imminent. He did indicate that they were trying to get second opinions to make sure that that was the case, but I think we all know where this is headed. He's not going to play again this year. Hopefully he'll be back ready for 2022. And this is one of those things this season that is genuinely just bad luck. Some of these injuries are genuinely bad luck. There's a lot wrong with this team that I blame Carroll for, that I blame Schneider for, that I blame uh, players for, that I'll blame Jody Allen for, but this is genuinely just bad luck, and it's a huge bummer because Tre Brown was playing very good football ever since he got onto the field against Pittsburgh about a month ago. So, very unfortunate. We can only hope that he'll come back and come back well in 2022, but barring a miracle, his season is over, and we're looking for help at the cornerback position. To continue on down the line here, Carroll also had some comments on Rashad Penny. He called his hamstring injury, which limited him to, I think, 8 snaps yesterday, slight. It's not a bad injury, but there's something there, so we've just got to make sure and take care of him and see what happens. So, given that it's Rashad Penny, his season is probably done as well. And at this point, I don't even know what the point is of playing him. He's obviously not going to be here next year. He probably won't even have an NFL career after this season, so I don't think there's any reason to continue to put him out there so he can get hurt again. And even if it is slight, for Rashad Penny, slight can mean you're going to be out for a long time. So I don't think there's any real point in bringing back Rashad Penny this season. So if he goes on IR soon and doesn't come back this year, I will not be surprised. We also got some clarity on Chris Carson's neck surgery. Now, we already know Carson's out for the season, but just to go over a little more information here, Carroll said his understanding is that Carson has a disc issue that needs to be fused. That's a surgery that can get him back somewhere late in the spring. That's what I've heard, so we'll see what happens with that. I don't know if I should be upset about this or not. I don't know if this is even worth being unhappy with, but talking about Chris Carson like we're really going to try to get him back next year just seems ridiculous at this point. It's very clear to me that he will not be here next year. He should not be here next year. He shouldn't be playing football anymore because he can't physically take it, and only bad things are going to happen if he tries to get out there now. So I don't know if I should give Carroll a pass for trying to be positive and optimistic here. I understand that we all like Chris Carson and we all appreciate the work he's done, but it just kind of irks me right now. Maybe it's just because I'm annoyed with Carroll in general, but we should not be talking about Carson like this. His career should be over, barring act of God. Okay, one more injury note before we get into some of the dysfunctional stuff. DJ Reed, who did not play yesterday, so Carroll was asked about when Reed is expected to return, and he said no update. He said the injury is not severe, and he basically said that he should be back later this season, but he gave no indication of when. So this secondary, which was really coming together, is suddenly desperately needing help again, because based off these comments, I don't get the sense that DJ Reed's going to be back for the Washington game. Based on the way Carroll talked about it, I think he's going to miss at least one more game. That would be my read. That's not based off anything factual or anything that Carroll definitively said. I just don't feel like he's going to be back. And that's it for the injury update. So let's take a look at something that was said yesterday and something that was said in response today. So we're going to go back in the time machine a little bit to after the game yesterday from Tyler Lockett, one of the established veterans of this team. So we have a tweet here from Michael Shandugar. Tyler Lockett, assessing what's wrong with the offense, ran through a list of things. But the most interesting says defenses are showing one thing on film and then doing something completely different on game day, and Seattle is not adjusting well. Says that happened last year too. Now, you can look at this as a Rorschach test for how you feel about the way this team is run and who you ultimately put a lot of the blame on for things not going well. Kind of sounds like he's being a little critical of the coaching, not preparing the team to deal with looks that they don't expect during the game, or looks that are different than what they show on film. But I think there are many different ways to interpret this statement, but it seems like a pretty reasonable one to make. So Lockett said this yesterday, and Carroll was asked about it a little bit ago, and here's what he had to say. When asked about Lockett's remarks during his Monday press conference, Carroll did not concur, initially responding, "You're assuming that he's right." After pausing for a second, Carroll took a step back to avoid calling out his own player, saying opponents do tend to play the Seahawks using a different defensive strategy than they would against other teams based on Wilson's mobility and their personnel. But as far as being prepared is concerned, he didn't agree with Lockett's premise that the Cardinals threw wrinkles at them that they weren't ready for. That's nothing new for us at all. We didn't have any problem knowing what they were doing, Carroll added. So I'm having a hard time reading this any other way than Lockett trying to say that the coaches aren't doing a good job and Carroll trying to say that no, their coaches are doing a good job. But I don't want to call out Tyler Lockett, but I am calling out Tyler Lockett. Yeah, this is not what happens in a healthy organization. This is not what happens in a healthy locker room. Corbin Smith went into a little more detail about this exchange, and he basically said, "It's very telling that one player seemed to take an underhanded shot at the coaching staff, while the other one immediately refuted the idea, and the coach also doesn't agree." So we have some back and forth going on in this locker room right now, some back and forth going on in this organization, it seems. And generally speaking, when it comes to these exchanges, you know I'm always going to side against Pete Carroll. I'm always going to believe that it's his shortcomings. With very few exceptions, I'm going to take the side of Tyler Lockett saying something like this. So I don't know how you can look at things like this and say things are okay in Seattle. I don't know how you can look at things like this and say, hey, Carroll needs to be brought back. He needs another shot at this. Or that we don't need to completely blow this up. This is not just a losing team. This is a team that is headed towards meltdown mode. This is a team that possibly doesn't like each other very much right now. And I'll tell you again, watch the whole press conference. I don't want to go into everything because we don't have enough time for that anyway, and you guys can watch it yourself. But Carroll, he didn't say it directly because that's not how Carroll typically rolls. But some of the things he said to me insinuated that he was blaming a lot of this on Russell Wilson, which is reasonable. But either way, this is not what happens in a healthy organization. This is not what should happen on a football team. Should not have the head coach making an underhanded jab at his star player like that. You should not have these things happening in public, in front of the media, where everybody can hear it. And again, some of this stuff is a Rorschach test. You look at it, you listen to it, and you come up with your own interpretation of it. But I'm having a hard time looking at this stuff and coming away with any conclusion other than this team is dysfunctional. A lot of the pieces are not fitting together well. Carroll seems to think that a lot of this is Wilson's fault, which is very indicative of the fact that either one of them will be gone next year or both of them will be gone, if that is indeed the feeling that Carroll has. And I got nothing good right now, man. There's nothing good to talk about with this team right now. Everything just sucks. And I'm trying to think of one positive thing to say to close this video out on, but I mean, you guys see the quote on screen. This is not what we're used to. This is not the way it should be. This is not the way a healthy football team speaks about each other in front of the media. All right, see you guys later in stream. Peace out. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think down below.